Hello everyone, I'm Tom Ryan. I'm the Chief Information and Strategy Officer for Santa Fe Public Schools, and I'm also the Chairman of the Board for the Consortium of School Networking. We have a great panel here today talking on what keeps that CTO up at night, or some of the issues that we're facing in building digital learning environments for our students. We're going to use the CoSN Leadership Survey that came out and is online as kind of the foundation for some of the questions that we've asked our community of IT leaders and some of the challenges and opportunities they see. And I'm going to bring our panel and ask them some of those questions and see what their relationship to supporting quality learning environments for all of our kids. And I'm going to start with Pete Just. Pete, a lot of schools are implementing one-to-one programs, and maybe not to the benefit that some of the community think that brings. Does one-to-one really have the potential or the legs to really improve or transform how we do teaching and learning?
Well, I think, thank you for the question. I think that the idea of a ratio is not a good one anyway, so I'm not very much in favor of the term one-to-one. I think back 10 or 15 years ago, we thought a lot in those terms of trying to get enough devices in a room so that students would all have access. But I mean, the truth is that many students already walk in with their own devices, and so even in our elementary schools, they have more than one-to-one. But I think if the question is about really devices, which I know it is, and whether devices will make a difference, I think that whatever the pane of glass is, and there are many different kinds for different purposes, I think that that's the delivery tool. So in a way, it's sort of like saying, is the pencil the best way to write on the paper? Well, maybe it's not the best way, but it is a way, and if it's all about trying to get students to draw, then to some degree when we're starting, it doesn't really matter what we use, but as we kind of move down the road, there's more fidelity. So I think that in terms of whether one-to-one has legs to impact instruction, I think that devices in the hands of students has a huge ability to impact instruction and become more personalized in our delivery to students, because we still are very much in that, at least in public schools across the United States, that traditional model, industrial model, and it allows us to break away from that, and I think that's a big win.
So Sheryl, you look like you have a pensive look there. What's your thought?
I think it begs a bigger question, as the point of a one-to-one or device ratio that Pete so aptly referenced, that it's really more about an engaged, relevant learning environment. And I think we saw that in the survey, and we hear that from our peers. More importantly, we hear it from our students, that they want a relevant, engaged learning environment. So if they need a device, then they need access to a device. And quite frankly, sometimes that device is a desktop machine that's loaded up with a lot of power to render graphics or to build something in an architecture class. And in another way, maybe it's just a much smaller tablet to just get on the internet and look up some information to enhance a conversation. So whether we have a certain device for every child in every classroom, every school, every day, to me begs the bigger question of why. And I think the why has to be answered before you say yes. And I've seen tons of school districts, and it should keep them up at night, I don't know if it is or not, where they say, we're going to do a one-to-one because we've got to compete. And I ask them, compete with what? Well, other school districts are doing it, and we have to compete so our parents will understand that we're competitive. And I say, you need to find out why first. So that was my pensive look. Is that
so what problem you're solving
yes.
is that why question, and then figure that out. And one-to-one, BYOD, or other things that painted glass might be the solution or part of the solution, but unless you know why, you're just implementing something that could be very expensive. And at the end of the day, the board members ask you, why do we do this? And we don't have a good answer, or at least we don't have a consistent answer.
That's
Correct.
what keeps you up at night, right?
That's what I'm saying.
I think it's the new norm, Tom. I think it's the new norm in education to have one-to-one devices. And as far as boards asking the question, or what are we getting, what's our benefit, they're actually coming to administrators and saying, hey, when are we going to do this? It's kind of interesting because years ago, my board used to come to me and say, hey, what are we getting for our technology spend? And I was just new to the district. I was in about a year. 21st century skills, But now what I see is it's not just a device, it's really the teachers and, how they're using the tools and transforming that instruction in the classroom that's making the difference.
And I'd like to add, one big thing, it's not about the device, it's whether the device is personal. And in our district, in Albemarle County Public Schools, students have the capability of manipulating the device in any manner they need necessary. So they're full administrators on their devices. They have the ability to add programs, delete programs as they need, so that way they can customize it. If you're going to provide students a device, you can't prohibit them from being able to use it the way they need to or intend to. We've heard a lot in all these sessions about what happens in the classroom. Well, what happens in the classroom 7 hours out of a day? What happens in the other hours they're not in the classroom? And can the student take that device and use it and be able to manipulate and access the world? So the why's access. This device provides them a portal, a capability that far surpasses what we have the ability to do in an analog world. Can we leverage it? Maybe, maybe not, right? Our teachers are all at different levels. But at what point do we not allow our teacher competency to stand in the way of what a student can do by not providing it to them? So in our district, we made the decision because it's the world our kids live in today, not the nostalgia world that we remember.
All right, so
And just to wrap up that thought, I agree with Vince. For us, in our district, we did get that pressure of, hey, what's going on down the street? And this was years ago now, and we don't think like that anymore. But there is that tension on many CTOs. And so we put it off for 2.5, 3 years until we had established what software was going to best fit into the curriculum that we have designed to meet the standards. So we kind of worked from standards to curriculum to the software that we were going to use, and we had ways to kind of feather that in until really teachers and students were demanding it, parents were demanding it, and that's really, I think, the approach you have to have. I don't think there's any question that it has legs, so to speak, but the question is, do you have the right why, and have you put the environment in place for teachers to be successful? Because if that's not there before stuff shows up, that's a nightmare.
Piggybacking on what Pete said, it took us 5 years to go through the process to determine, is this something that's going to be viable, sustainable, and does the curriculum fit into what the learning goals are in the classroom? So it wasn't an overnight just let's give some teachers training and roll out devices to all the kids the following year. It was a 5-year journey to get to a point of a full rollout.
So you've got this 5 years of investment. You probably had to go out after some capital monies for a bond election to raise that funds. So Vince, how do you respond to a board member, a community member, or that taxpayer about this technology? How do I know it's been successful? What do I use to measure that?
Sure. How do we know desks are successful? We spend a lot of money on desks. Ooh, cafeteria tables. Ton of money on cafeteria tables. What are they getting us? The issue isn't about that. The issue is really 100%. My son is now 10 years old. That dude has never lived in a world to where an iPhone wasn't readily available. It's the world he lives in. Information is at his fingertips. We don't want that to stop when it hits the classroom. And right now, we're seeing our teachers kind of work back and forth. What I can tell you is when I cruise through the high schools or the middle schools, in unstructured learning devices, every student will have a device out or multiple devices. Because they have their student-issued laptop, and then they'll have their phone that they're probably listening to music, and they may have another device that they're doing something on. But then you turn the corner and hit the classrooms, and it's like 1 out of every 3 classrooms will be using technology. So again, for me, it has nothing to do with the teachers. It has to do with the kids. and making sure that the kids have what they need to be successful. So success for me is, do we see kids progressing through school? Do we see them graduating on time? All the things that we would say that make us a great school system. If we're able to continue that and provide them an educational experience that is relevant to the way they live outside of school, I'll fight that argument with any board member any day.
Well, let me push back a little
But,
bit. So you're
let
telling
me add on to that, if I might, Tom.
Sure.
Then you can push against
I
two.
don't think you have to fight if you've preloaded the conversation that it's not about the technology.
Right.
I think if you go to the board with a proposal to put a device in every kid's hands and say that it's going to impact student learning, that you've already set yourself up for that question.
It's the wrong argument.
But if you go to the board with a package about how we're going to innovate a learning environment based on student and teacher feedback, and even though it's a passé term, update the learning environment to be more 21st century, more job ready, use the right language, then I don't think you'll get those questions. But so many people go for funding for a device program. And we should be going for funding for an improving learning program that cuts across everything.
Well, and if you're going to do that, then that means you need your curriculum team
Right.
alongside you. You can't go there as a CTO, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're all also in agreement that this is something that you're always doing in association with the curriculum team, your chief academic officer, and it's always a full frontal attack, so to speak, to help everyone understand why we're doing it and why we need the dollars.
So all of you have your instructional people and your teachers all on board, ready to go and using technology seamlessly and
It's a process. It's a process.
It's a process.
Now, not all. All is a very
All the big
dangerous
number.
term.
It's a big number. It's like 100%.
It's a process.
It's a journey, Tom.
It's a journey.
Remember, it's a
Okay.
journey.
So kind of a wishy-washy answer then, I think, on the how do you justify technology if it's just a journey?
Well, I think you have to have a metric. So we had a way we established a baseline, and we do 2 surveys a year. We used to do the Speak Up survey, and now we use another product that we do twice a year. And that gave us a baseline 3.5 years ago. And on that baseline, we can show improvements in the classroom from the teaching perspective, classroom environment from the support perspective, access from, how many things are out there, can they get on? And so we actually have a way that I call it our speedometer to help us know that we're kind of moving forward. I do think you have to find some baseline against you which you can measure and that you measure regularly. I think twice a year is pretty good.
Well, there's no way to
We
isolate
have that same
technology as let's be real. There's no way to isolate technology as a single
That's
indicator
true, yeah.
for success. What we do know is having access to resources and materials gives a student a better chance at success. Mm-hmm. That's the why we buy them textbooks, right? We buy them textbooks so they'll have the information to be able to look it up. Well, check out McGraw-Hill upstairs. They're scrambling to digitize everything because everything's on the web. We also know that things are changing daily. So do we want to buy a book that's going to be, or use a book that's 10 years old that may not have the current countries in it? So having a device that has the ability to provide them that instant resource, I can guarantee that I can make a justification for that over I can a whole bunch of other expenditures that we seem to make.
I have to jump in here on our process, Tom, because through our process we had teachers providing qualitative and quantitative data each year. So we were able to track that over a 5-year period. And one of our goals is student success or failure rates to really increase the student success rate. We have a couple schools with algebra class, and 65% success rate or 35% failure rate is what it was looking like prior to having a device. That metric moved up each year to 100%. Now I can't say that was the device at all. I can say it may have been part of the device, but it was really how the teacher was changing their instructional practices in the classroom that made those changes, right?
Probably because of the device.
And we didn't see any drops. We're a very high achieving district in Illinois. We didn't see any dips in achievement at all. So the device was not having a negative impact on instruction.
Yeah, we looked at the, the 4 C's is one of the metrics that we use. It's not a technology metric, to your point, Vince. And then we also looked at other metrics, like are we improving graduation rates and things like that. And we can't say technology is the reason. It's hard to say that anything in particular is the reason, but it is sort of because of that full frontal kind of approach of like we're going to do several things.
Absolutely.
And the scientist in me, I used to teach science, doesn't like that because I can't isolate the variables. But I do know that in an area like this, that this type of an approach I think is the only one that can be successful.
So what I think I heard is the question isn't about how does technology increase test scores. It's about building modern learning environments that are designed to support the kids with the tools that they need and will need to use to be successful.
That was not wishy-washy. You did that very well.
Yeah.
And that...
And that's what we said.
That's what I thought I heard. That's why I was summing it up. Yeah. All right, well, let's take a little switch back. We've heard I've heard in a couple sessions, I've got this great tool. I'm a provider, and we need to implement this. Or you put in some... you got the instructional systems that you have to put in and design at this point, but you also have financial systems and HR systems and student information systems and those back office resources you have. For those folks in the room that might be solution providers, what are some of the biggest mistakes or lessons learned as you work with your various providers of the tools that you need in your schools? And I'll start with you, Keith.
I think there's, I got 3 things on my list here. It's don't try to be everything to a school district. Solutions are fit to one particular focus of curriculum, not to everything. I've had many solutions come in and they said it can do A, B, C, and D, and then you start looking at a solution that's really only good at the primary thing that they were focusing on originally with the product. The other piece is, really look at the data security and privacy piece. Right now, this is a big issue in education, not just in education, but everywhere. With the phishing scam that took place with Google last week, was just a primary example of things are to come. They're getting very sophisticated in attacks, and what measures do the companies have in place to protect our data? And then also on our side, as educators, we're building in some agreements that supplant or supersede the agreements from the providers because they're not strong enough to protect that data either. And then the last thing that I don't like to hear is, what's your deadline? When are we going to see this next week? I understand everybody's got quotas and that to meet, but I don't like hearing the term, hey, when are you going to push the button and make the order? Don't push me to make a decision on something because I quite frankly just won't. We're going to make the right decision based on the needs of the district.
So at the end of a period of time, you got somebody pushing to, you need to buy now because this is the end of our sales quarter, which is really on their focus, not on your
Not on
focus.
mine, exactly.
Okay, Sheryl, you look like you were...
One of the things that I think would be a great piece of advice to people who are attempting to come into the K-12 market and work with us on solutions for our school districts is you need to know the district. Time and time again, I have people that call or come in or I see at a conference and they want to have a serious conversation about something that we already have a serious solution for. Or they want to take us down a path and they don't know enough about the district to have a conversation with me about it. And so, but when people come to me because they know the size of my district, they've looked at what products we're using, they have a little bit of background, they may have already met with my curriculum people, talking to them about solutions, then it's a conversation that is much more comprehensive and cohesive in terms of the needs of our district. And that is totally impressive to me. When someone knows a little, don't have to know everything, but when they know a little bit about our district, what that says to me is someone who has a purchase order, that you have enough interest in my district and you know the product well enough and you have a hunch that you might support our goals, then that's a conversation to me that's valuable and oftentimes results in success for the vendor partner and for our school district.
There's a little bit of tension in that. I think we all get these emails or phone calls from people that say, hey, I want to sit down for an hour and talk to you and better understand your district. Well, if I gave an hour to everyone that asked that, I mean, my God, I mean, 80 hours a week wouldn't be enough, right? So I have to therefore make decisions because I'm only going to put in 60 hours a week. So, you know, you need to do your homework, in other words. Look, check out our website, understand who we are, come to conferences like this and CoSN and other ones that you can get to know us a little bit, and then we can start the conversation at point C and move towards, you know, D or E or whatever it is. So I think, you know, having that investment up front and not being lazy is important. And also understanding who we are as organizations, and I'm talking about all of us. I know there's a lot of venture capital folks here today at this conference, and there's a lot of folks that are developers that are trying to create things. Make sure you understand what it is you're developing for, because a lot of times you might be developing for something that we needed 2 years ago, or you might be developing for something that really isn't exactly what we're wanting or needing.
I would also say too, you know, have a strong focus group or local user group for the product that you're presenting to us, because what I find out is some of our best systems are the ones that have a strong user group where they're listening to the school districts. They're really listening to the needs and implementing some of those needs on a roadmap down, you know, in a later release or that. So I think listen to the school districts and have a very strong user group that's going to help you develop your product.
So let's shift from folks that are coming in with a new product to, I was talking to one of our CIOs at CoSN, and he asked me, when did buying a textbook become an IT project? And with the thought that everything now has some technology in it, and it interfaces with multiple systems, with professional development, with training. How would you talk about the partnership or the relationship with multiple vendors that you'll need to implement some of a new ERP or a new system within your school?
So I think for us, a lot of it comes down to when we have siloed systems, they become useless to us in terms of the big picture. So if you're going to bring in a system that's only going to give you math content and only provides you math results, and it's only going to reside in that math spot, that isn't where our teachers are interacting every day. So interoperability between the systems is going to be huge. So as we start to do evaluations back and forth between different systems, what we're looking for are systems that are open and we have the ability to pull and push content and information back and forth. Our teachers don't want to have to download rosters and upload rosters. They shouldn't have to. So interoperability is a huge piece for us in terms of the vendors.
I would agree with that. We've been working for 2 years to develop our LMS content library, and to your point, it's, you know, I mean, we'll work with a company and they'll say, oh yeah, we can integrate IMS Global, you know, LTI or better yet, a common cartridge, then common cartridge, and then you start getting down the road. Matter of fact, this happened to us just last week. We had brought it to the school board, we had adopted something, and then all of a sudden the price changed. It quadrupled. Like, come on.
That never happens.
I can't work with that, right? So to be able to have that interoperability for us is crucial. It's our way forward is to make the LMS the one place. As a matter of fact, we relabeled our LMS the Wayne Learning Hub because the goal is to put everything there. No more sign-ons anywhere else. Our teachers want to be able to pull your product, your specific module, and pull it into their lesson plan, not have it be something where students, teachers are just going to put in a hyperlink and then they're going to hop over to your site and then they have to log in again. Even if you have single sign-on, that's not good enough.
So if you flip it around to the businesses, and I don't know if we have any, the question would be, if we made you use 5 different systems and you just couldn't use Salesforce to manage all your leads, if you had to use this product to do that, this product to do that, that product to do that, how efficient and effective would it be for you to run your organization?
Right.
So coming back, please don't ask us to do it with kids.
Vince,
Well,
to
and
that- go ahead.
Well, the other thing is, a lot of companies and, you know, we're not the only people in our school districts that go to conferences and meetings. We've got our principals and our teachers and our directors, and everybody's going to find the new, greatest, and the solution that will solve every problem in their department or their school. And so a lot of times, if a school district doesn't have a policy or procedures in place to talk about this type of alignment within the district and processes, then something gets bought with a PO out of a siloed department, and then it doesn't work. And people on the other side are saying, oh, the technology people, they can't make it work. So as an example, we've put in procedures that we don't care what it is. If it has a URL anywhere in it, any place, and our purchasing agent now, anything that comes through has to go through a process where we approve it. Because years ago, there was a very, very, very large purchase with a great deal of money that got purchased and paid for, and we couldn't use it because we were not going to do everything that it required to be useful, and so all of that went back. And so it left an incredibly bad taste in everybody's mouth because it was like we were, I think somebody said this morning, the CEO of no. And that's certainly not any of us that will keep us up at night if that's the reputation in our district, because we're supposed to enable learning by the use of innovative products and software and platforms.
Amen.
And when we have to say no for something because it really doesn't meet standards, then it makes us look bad, and that is not going to make any of us happy with a company that hasn't had the courtesy just to pick up the phone or send an email and say that in smaller districts that don't have discrete processes like this in place.
We have processes in place, but getting back to what Vince was talking about, interoperability, it really comes down to having open standards for us to be able to use. I was talking to someone else earlier today. We have 5 programmers on staff, or I have to spend that money out of my operating budget just to be able to support the district. We're a very high achieving district, need a lot of data, but also the interoperability piece. We're transferring data back and forth based on what we can do with different databases. We're not using a lot of tools. There's not a lot of tools out there. So I would just ask vendors to look at using open standards, SAML, OAuth 2, LTI, whatever it is. Don't use a proprietary protocol, because if I'm locked in a proprietary protocol, then I have to work with this solution, I have to work with this solution, then I have to work with this solution, and we're spending so much time on the back end to make it all happen. We really are magicians in our district. We are. People come to us all the time and say, hey, do you think you can do this? And we look at it and we'll say, we'll talk to the vendor, make some determinations, can we not? But then we do work magic to integrate.
But maybe
is
you
that fair
can't.
to us?
There were
Maybe you
folks that had
can't.
proprietary systems, and they're called textbooks manufacturers. And now we're moving away from them to digital pieces. So if you're developing a digital resource, don't be the textbook of tomorrow.
Of no.
Yeah, because we're seeing past it, we're moving past it.
You know, we
Now.
have teachers play a big part in our decision-making process of choosing our digital resources for good reason. And what we've done is we've kind of pulled back the magical curtain and said, you think we could just make everything work, but here's the reality. It's going to fit in one of 8 buckets, right? We're going to have to do nightly uploads on this far side. We don't want to go there. Or you're going to have to do the rosters yourself. You don't want to go there.
They're always a fan of that.
Right? That's on that bad side. And then on this side, we've got full, complete common cartridge interoperability, which means that the stuff you like to do when you're building your lesson plan in the LMS, you can just go into the library, type in your standard and what type of thing you're looking for, and pull it right in. That one piece fits in. So once we've kind of pulled, we're to the point now, I think, because of the teacher involvement, they really have to see behind the curtain a little bit to understand, well, if you choose that, so just, again, to vendors and folks that are creating things, we want you to be on this side, because as time goes by, the things on the other side, they're not going to want to enter their own rosters and so on and so forth. So, you know, part of the thing that keeps me up at night is that the teachers are participating at a high level, and we're really listening to their voice, and to have to say no to them, or to say, okay, but, and then we're stuck with the product for, 6 years. That's terrible, and we probably will not go back to that product or maybe anything that company sells again once that bad taste happens.
Well, here's our reality right now. We're looking for integrated solutions that would integrate to our systems. I'll go back to 2006. We developed online registration system. Now SIS vendors are finally coming out with registration systems.
We're buying them.
Advanced placement testing applications, summer camp registration, summer school registration. I have a whole suite of applications that we developed in .NET, Microsoft technologies, and now I'm looking for ways to see if we can take that, package it, take a package, and integrate with one solution. There are some out there, but I don't know if they're robust enough, because I really want to take away that workload off of my staff. I really do. I want to reduce that complexity, and I want to reduce that cost that I'm spending on my operational budget for consultant programmers to come in and take care of this for me.
Well, what you want is what all of us have to have. We're spending less money, but we must be more productive, and we have to be increasingly more efficient. So it's that new efficiency model that's being thrust upon us. So, and you have a luxury, because you're a sophisticated district, to have 5 developers.
It's not by choice.
Well,
it's not by choice. I
do you have 5
have no
developers?
choice but to provide the resources and take away money out of
2.
another part of the budget, my capital expenditures,
I
to be
know.
able to support this. It's unfortunate, but you're right. I mean, that's a new
You're
reality.
a rarity. You're a rarity.
And we contracted that out.
Let's shift a little bit. You talked about digital content, you brought up LMSs. We just got done with Common Core kind of going, and now it's kind of going, at least some of the Smarter Balance and Park are, the number of states that are using them has dropped off, but the use of online assessments across the field has really grown up. And in fact, I think Park has probably helped build out our networks to the point where we can start to take advantage of those for other resources. As we look at collecting formative and summative data on students to really change practices, is that real, or should we start backing away from all the assessments that we're doing in an online fashion? Sheryl?
It is real. The struggle is real. And the issue, I think, Tom, is it's all about mandates. In terms of formative, I think lots of districts and lots of companies have come up with really great solutions for formative assessment. And lots of us are using those to help, as assessment should, drive and improve instruction, not just as a penalty or a benchmark. Assessment always has been, even before we had technology, assessment informs instruction. And so when it's used that way, it's extremely valuable. But what has happened, again, my take on it, is with the online assessment models that have come down, state departments have grappled with this, and they've been seen in some ways as punitive rather than informative, and it has started to shift and drive curriculum. Because as standards have evolved, and as you said correctly, many states have shifted away from Park, from Smarter Balance, and certainly from Common Core, but they've repackaged their standards and given it a new name. In Louisiana, we went through and did a crosswalk and had 1 million people review our standards and our assessments, and we've repackaged it, and we now have the Louisiana standards. But if I looked at your standards, they would probably be eerily similar. And the testing that is embedded in all that, our teachers tell us, and I hear from teachers around the country, that their curriculum has become more rigid, less innovative, less of an ability to think outside the box, because they have got to cover these standards to get these kids ready for a test that may be online, but in many ways is not relevant to what teachers believe that children should know and be able to do, because a lot of that's not measurable in an online assessment. So I'm a little bit of a worry wart about that, and it does keep me up at night, because I see it driving teaching and learning in some ways in a direction that we don't want to, because we want authentic assessments. We want things that are relative. I was in a panel this morning talking about that similar conversation, and I thought to myself, someone mentioned state legislatures, which basically have a great deal of control and authority over school districts and what we do. And we can talk about this all day long, but until we can empower and advocate for what our students know and should be able to do to get policymakers to shift their thinking on this, I think we're going to be going down a path that doesn't meet our student needs fully in every way it could.
And we've started to transition away from formative assessments. Formative assessment is just another way to have an isolated piece in terms of how we're going to measure somebody.
But what about the summative,
So the
online
summative
end of year,
and the
pass or fail?
the concept of performance-based assessments, the concept of portfolio-based instruction, that is the shifting demographic for our division. We use in Virginia, we have the standards of learning,
You do,
commonly
those
known as
SOLs.
the SOLs, and the great Commonwealth of Virginia has stuck with them the whole way through. But the part for us is we want students to have a demonstrated learning path that they're able to walk away from. And knowing that nothing that they'll do in life will ever be isolated to math being taught in one space, English being taught in another, history being taught. One of the things that concept is having is we're starting to blend more of our classes together. So we're having more multiple disciplinary instruction happening at the high school, middle school, and elementary level. So that way we can come out with these performance-based assessments that allow students to demonstrate all types of learning. Now the problem is there aren't a lot of tools for us to be able to utilize and measure, so we're hodgepodging some stuff together now. But the idea of a kid logging in, taking a 15, 20 question quiz or test, we do it. I'd be lying to say if I didn't, but we're shying away from it as much as humanly possible.
So Sheryl, to your point about the online test can't capture the kinds of information that you want about kids, so what does? How do you capture data or information?
I think Vince, aptly discussed it when he talked about portfolios and performance-based assessments and things that teachers do innately. But at the end of the day, if a student doesn't pass the EOC, then of course online assessment, they can have straight A's, they can have beautiful portfolios, they're not passing. If they fail the end of course, the EOC.
So is that a function of the online test, or is that
State.
a function?
Yes, that's
It's
a
a
state
function
mandate.
of what we could do today, I think. I mean, we keep talking about quantitative type assessments, and as good as those can be for some things, that is not the best way to measure where our students are. Unfortunately, it's the easiest way, right? I mean, multiple choice.
And it's the easiest way. It's the easiest understandable way
Yeah.
by policymakers, and
That's right.
That's our challenge.
That's the challenge.
To shift that thinking and engage and inform policymakers so that we don't have this rigidity that's layered on top of innovative things we're doing.
I'm laughing because I heard two Finnish speakers talk today.
Yeah.
And they both said the same thing. If you guys just did the innovations that you built here in the U.S. and actually used them,
Yeah.
you would be where we are, because that's all we're using.
Right. That's the amazing thing. It's so frustrating for me. But, I guess I understand, because they're not educators, that we all believe in accountability, right? I mean, everyone up here, we keep our employees accountable. We want to keep students accountable. Our teachers will not, we're past the age where our teachers are going to let a student fail. And so, to be able to shift to something that is more qualitative, that would be great. Unfortunately, the pressure on us is that we're not allowed to do that. At the end of course assessment, it's not about that. I used to teach AP Bio, and so I get it. I wanted my kids to get a good score. I wanted them to get a 5 so they can get into Purdue or wherever and not have to take that class.
But what does a 5 mean? Because
that's exactly where I was
if they turn
going.
around and give the kid the same test in September, he gets a 30% on it.
That's
They got
right.
a 95 on it.
Well, I
That's what I was going to say. What we found out was that, after teaching that class for 7 years, I could probably tell you who's going to get the 5s, and it wasn't necessarily the ones that learned it the best at the end, right? It was the ones that were good test takers that are going to be able to nail the key questions that I know are going to be on the exam. I mean, it's a very rigid curriculum, AP Bio, so, I could predict it even. So that's the sadness of it, is that there are certain kids that aren't going to do well because of who they are, and a lot of times they tend to look and come from a certain place. But we want to be able to broaden that definition, I think, something that is actually meaningful.
Well, and I heard a conversation this morning aligned with that thinking around this AP, and there were several of the speakers talking about, well, we're shifting away from AP, we don't have any grades, we have authentic assessments and portfolios, and at the end, when our kids are getting ready to graduate and we're having to send transcripts off to colleges, then we put some grades in because they have to have a transcript. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, I don't think we can get away with that in the public school system. We're just going to put some grades in at the end of 12th grade because, and the thing I didn't say because I didn't get a chance to ask a question was, well, that might be good with some parents that are informed, engaged, and may have made a deliberate choice to have a different type of learning journey for their child. But most parents, a lot of parents believe they're education experts, and that is because they went to school.
13 years there.
They went to a school, and so they want to see a grade, or they want to see something that resembles some way they can compare with the other mamas at the baseball field or at the football game, or they want to be able to align that with their thinking of what success is. So a beautiful piece or a document may look good to them, but is my child going to pass? And as a longtime principal, I was a principal that experimented a great deal with all kinds of assessments, and at the end of the day, mama wanted to know differently. So we've got a policymaker education thing we have to do around assessment, and we have to do a mama education plan around assessment, and hopefully as some of the students we're teaching now become parents, hopefully not too soon, but they'll have a different thought process, but we're still dealing with people that didn't really grow up innately with it, with technology, and so they've got a little bit of
Well, you figure the kids in high school.
quandary. Yeah,
Our systems
question.
are based on benchmarks. Let's face it. I mean, they're based on benchmarks. And if you look at the high school, we're all high schools in our district, 12,100 kids. You look at, we've conditioned our kids. We've conditioned our kids to make sure they get the best score on the ACT so they can get into that top 10 school. But we've conditioned them. It's really should change to look at the whole child. Those portfolios you're talking about.
Yep.
You know, what are those other things that make up the child versus that one test score, that one test that's going to get them into one school, or that transcripts that's going to show these grades? There has to be more to that.
It's interesting, just let me cap this up, because I think that's a good point and kind of ties in with even how we started. When, after we were maybe a year into our digital learning project at the high school, I met with about 50 students that are kind of the principal's advisory committee, right? And I said, so how do you think it's going? And they said, well, okay, but at the end of the day, the conversation was really about, they were really uncomfortable because, as it turns out, most of these students, at least half of them, were in the top of their class vying for top 30.
Well, they had already gamed the system. They already knew how to be successful.
The system worked. I was changing the system, right?
Yeah.
Encouraging their teachers to do things differently, and they weren't too happy about that. So interestingly enough, even from the mouths of these babes, I mean, they're juniors or seniors, but they kind of pushed back a little bit on this because they learned the system, to your point.
Don't be disruptive. They got to figure it out.
Well, and that's something we do have to pay attention to because that's something that keeps them up at
We
night.
stripped ranking away, probably about 3 years ago because of this very reason.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kids trying to vie for those top spots, trying to compete, and they're feeling the pressure. Now if a parent or a student wants that, we can go back into history and pull that if they really want it. But colleges aren't asking for that all the time now. So we did a lot of research into this, and the bottom line is, the kids shouldn't have to compete for that top spot. All they need to know is the subject matter to be able to get into a university that they can come in and meet the criteria, or they're taking that AP class that, if it's a 3, it's a 3. There's other criteria that goes along with that.
So we only have about 4 minutes left. I do have one other question, but if there's anybody in the audience that has a question that they'd like to ask about any of the things that we've talked about or something new, I'd be happy to field those. And in the interim, I want to talk a little bit about cloud-based. Our survey showed that 75% of our school districts are using cloud-based productivity tools. And that 4 out of 5 CIOs are saying that that's throughout their district. The use of this tool is a different way of computing, a different way of engaging or collaborating, storing, etc. What are the things that this cloud-based change is impacting your school district? Now, it started in the productivity tools, but it started to take over LMS and some of the other systems in your organization.
So I can tell you from our perspective, the question really comes down to, do you have operating or do you have capital funds? If you have capital funds, you're going to look to be able to put in a system and have it all in-house. If you have ongoing operating funds that you can absorb the yearly fee in, then it's easy for you to be able to bring in cloud-based. We're cloud-based in terms of our more volatile data storage, which is our end user stuff, teacher folders, student folders, etc. For our primary systems, we still maintain those in-house, partly because I have a more robust capital budget than I do operating budget.
We're at a place right now, Vince, too, where our private cloud internally in the district, we're 5 years this summer, and now the vendor is increasing my support 600% because they want me to buy new equipment. So now I'm evaluating, do I continue to stay in-house? Do I find another support mechanism that's cheaper that can still support that? Because they want me to move. They want me to purchase that new hardware. That has put a bad taste in my mouth from the vendor right now, obviously. But I'm looking to move some of the operations out to the cloud, but also my concern of the data security piece. And so I'm evaluating that all right now. This is a big piece for me. I was talking to Keith Kruger, CEO of CoSN, about this and doing a TCO study on this project. So it'll really be interesting how this one pans out to see if we just stay in-house or if we move everything out or partial.
And what moves out?
And exactly.
Well, I think
some stays in, some goes out.
I think we're in big transition on this. I think that based on budgets, I think you said it, very aptly, that it's a conversation about where's the money and how long are you going to have the money and how can you make the case to your CFO and your superintendent about where you have to either shift funds or where they have to increase funds. And that conversation about getting more money, I think today is becoming more and more difficult in terms of state budgets and cuts that are happening. So we're all having to economize and hopefully not downsize, but certainly not looking for big increases in our budget. So I think it's a transitory time when we have to think about what data do we have to have and when do we have to have it and what's critical. I like to use the analogy of some things, it's about the choke formula. How far do I have to get where I can get a hold of somebody when something goes wrong? And because at the end of the day, those of us sitting up here, if something goes wrong, they're not going to look at a company. They're not going to look at a contract or a vendor agreement. We're going before the board to explain why there was a data loss, a data breach, somebody couldn't get to critical data for graduation or something.
So I'm going to have to use the choke
On
strategy
me.
right now because it's at the end. I do want to thank the committee, the panel here for your insights and for sharing us. So thank you very much.
I gave you that one.